This is the Investor Connect podcast program. This is Hall T. Martin. I'm the host of the show, in which we interview angel investors, venture capital, private equity, family offices, and many other investor groups for startups and growth companies. I hope you enjoy this episode. Thank you for joining us. Hello, this is Hall Martin with Investor Connect. Today we're here with JP Bauman of Altira Group. JP, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, great to be here, Hall. Thanks for having me.
Can you tell us how you got into early stage investing?
Yeah, sure. So I've spent my entire career either investing in private companies as a private equity or venture capital professional, or working with startups either as a founder or an advisor to those startups. And so I found that I really enjoyed the entrepreneurial aspect of venture capital and early stage investing, the opportunity to work with entrepreneurs, to build companies, to figure out business plans and strategy, to navigate organization development over time. And so, having sat in that entrepreneurial seat, just felt like I had a lot to bring to bear as an investor and a board member and a trusted advisor. And so I joined Altira 6 years ago, and that's been really my foray into an early stage tech investor, and really have enjoyed it and found it to be a good fit for some of those things I just mentioned.
So what does Altira invest in, and what's the focus of the group?
Sure. So Altira has been around for over 20 years, and we have been focused on that over that time, specifically on investing in and commercializing new technologies that are applicable to the energy space, particularly the oil and gas world. And so we look specifically for technology and software that create meaningful step change in the operations of the oil and gas or other industrial related firms. So be it field telecommunications to hybrid battery power systems to artificial intelligence and data analytics that are solving real problems in these spaces. Those are the kind of things that we're actively investing in and looking for. And so from a stage perspective, folks should think of us as a growth stage capital provider. So we don't take a lot of technology risk, but once that technology has been proven, there's customers starting to adopt that offering, our capital is really well suited to helping that entrepreneur accelerate that growth and scale that company.
So the oil and gas field is interesting industry. How do you overcome the challenge of technology adoption in that space?
Yeah, sure. So the energy industry is not necessarily renowned for adopting new technologies very quickly. And so really keenly aware of that, being in this space for many years. And so I think our model is really specifically set up to address that. And so, a couple of things. I mean, the entire team here at Altira, we've all spent most of our career in and around the oil field. We've all been entrepreneurs ourselves. And so we bring a lot of experience helping entrepreneurs and companies navigate the industry, navigate the growth, how to price and structure their offering, and what customers to target, so on and so forth. And so that really helps. But also what we've done is when we went out and raised our sixth fund, we brought in a handful of what are called the U.S. super independent oil and gas companies. So these are actually customers or end users of the technologies that we invest in. And so we get to work with these limited partners of ours in a very structured way. And so first starts with just sitting down with them and understanding what are your pain points, what problems are not being solved by the existing large service companies out there in the space. And so from there, that really directs where we go hunting for technologies and how we react to technologies as those cross our path. And so once we find those technologies, we're able to leverage the internal subject matter experts at these oil and gas operator companies to help us perhaps do trials and proof of concepts, leverage their internal subject matter experts to really help kick the tires on the technology, really help prove that there's a strong value proposition, a large market. And then once we make the investment, we bring these large customers to bear as fast adopters. And so what it allows us to do is really scale these companies very quickly, provide them great reference customers, signal to other peers in the industry that this is a real legitimate company. And then also the access that the entrepreneurs and these companies get to these customers is unique, in that they have an indirect ownership. And so they're that much more open to providing feedback and the technology roadmap and so on and so forth. So that's really how we're set up here at Altira, is to address that adoption challenge that exists in the energy space and other sort of industrial spaces as well.
Well, for the startup listening to this podcast, who is a good fit for your program? What do they need to have, or what criteria they need to achieve before you think they would have a meaningful engagement with you?
Yeah, so we don't take a lot of technology risks. So we like to find solutions that have been in the field or been used in the headquarters and have customers and are really looking to take on that capital partner that is beyond just capital. It's capital plus some really experienced industry partners plus the customer base that we can help bring to the table as well. So we don't have a very specific defined threshold of what fits with us or not, but that's typically the first thing we're looking at. The second thing is, as I mentioned before, we have these limited partners who are the ultimate end users of this software and technology. And if this particular item addresses a large pain point, we can get involved in an even earlier stage from an investment perspective, because we know that once we make the investment, we can bring those customers to the table kind of from day one. So those are kind of where we're focused, and that's all the other typical things. I mean, we're very focused on management teams. Not every team has all the pieces, but a receptiveness to kind of bring in some of the missing pieces. We look for folks that have strong industrial logic and acumen and understand the user base and the oil field and some of these industrial technologies that they're pursuing. So that's really important to us. We can help supplement some of that knowledge, but we do like folks that have that base knowledge from the beginning.
So, what are some of the key trends going on in the oil field industry today that really drive startup investment and the growth metrics?
Yeah, sure. So, I think it's an interesting an interesting time to be making investments in this space. You're seeing a handful of things kind of converge that has really got us very optimistic in that this is a great time to be making investments. I mean, the first is, you're starting to see the startup companies themselves, right? The cost to start these companies, the cost to trial them is as low as it's ever been, right? So no longer do you have to stand up a big enterprise software implementation to get value out of some of these offerings. And so I think that's important for adoption and for these companies and their ability to scale and prove out the value proposition very quickly. So you're starting to see that. I think number two, Wall Street's been making a pretty big push and emphasis increase profitability and cash returns back to shareholders. And for us, that means that these operations, these companies have to be even tighter with their operations, even more efficient. And so again, that leads to technology adoption. And then the last thing is, the oil and gas prices always puts pressure on these guys to be more efficient. But you have another kind of trend happening where you have a lot of folks leaving the industry just because of retirements and things like that. And so we're in a place here in the U.S. where we know where the oil and gas is, and that's relatively easy to figure out. But it's how do we operate more efficiently, especially in an environment where you get different price swings and things like that. And so you're having to do more, but with fewer people, and you're in places where it's hard to attract people to certain areas. So that all points to having to use technology and software to make yourself more efficient and your operations more efficient. So again, we think it's a great time to be investing in this space because of those trends and those sort of parts of the industry that are happening and that are permanent right now.
So it sounds like you have to be in the quadrant for reducing costs. That's what really drives adoption. People are looking for tools that take the current operation and just makes it cheaper to do, replacing people with technology, replacing equipment with technology, and making that a more efficient process.
I would address one thing you said there. I'm not sure it's so much replacing people as much as there aren't quite as many people there available. So that's one issue. I think the other issue is these companies are trying to figure out, hey, we have these real smart people, subject matter experts inside our company. How do we leverage them more broadly across our company? How do we take what's in their brain and give that to other folks? Perhaps it's junior people, perhaps it's people in a different basin or different region. So you are seeing that. I think it is a cost approach. I think it's being more efficient. I think it's leveraging existing intelligence and subject matter expertise. And I think it's also part of it is just attracting a younger workforce that is used to working with these technologies. And I think a lot of it is just people have got over some of the concerns about trying new technologies. And at the end of the day, a lot of these just make sense. And they're not looked at as just cost savers, but really some strategic advantage from a competitive standpoint. So I think those are kind of things that are grabbing these customers' attention.
In the oilfield space, is there a large number of people that are about to retire, as there are in many other industries, as the boomer population ages out? Is the oilfield facing a deficit of workers because of retirement coming up?
Yeah, and I can't comment so much on how it compares to other industries, but this is something that's been termed the great crew change, and it's a symptom of some ups and downs in the industry that's pushed some people out of the industry and caused some to be hesitant to come back in. And so, yeah, you kind of have this barbell of human resources in these companies where you have some very senior folks that are nearing that retirement age, and then some new folks coming into the industry. That is a challenge for these companies, and not to mention that the oil and gas business isn't always in the most exotic or most desirable places to live, right? And so there is a human resource concern and issue here that is very much front of mind of these oil and gas companies.
Great. Well, in the final minutes of our interview here, what else should we talk about that we haven't covered yet?
Well, I think we covered a lot of what I had in mind. I mean, as I said, Altira, we're investing in our sixth fund. We have plenty of capital to be put to work, so we're actively looking for new investments in the space. I would say we're not just focused on oil and gas applications. I think we're seeing more and more companies that are startups, technology that are coming from outside of the space. And there's been some receptiveness by the oil and gas companies to try things that weren't necessarily invented in their sector. And so we look at things, as I said, sort of more broadly industrial technologies. We're finding a lot of these things that apply in other industrial spaces can also apply to the oil and gas space. So I'll leave you with that. But we're very active and always looking forward to meeting management teams with an interesting technology.
Well, that's great. So how best for the audience to get back in touch with you?
Sure. So you can find more about myself in the Altira Group at our website, altiragroup.com. It can be found on LinkedIn. And then also I have a Twitter account. Twitter handle is Bauman JP, Bauman JP. And that's just a place where I kind of do a collection of curated articles that I read quite often about anything and everything that has to do with venture capital, tips and resources for building early stage companies, and just a handful of other resources there that I think would be interesting to both investors as well as the startup companies themselves. And so I do quite a bit of reading, and whenever I find something I think would be valuable, I just go ahead and retweet it. So it's a decent place for finding things on all sorts of topics.
Well, that's great. We'll put that in the show notes and let people get back in touch with you that way, and appreciate your taking time to talk today, and hope to have you back for a follow-up interview in the near future, and appreciate your sharing this information.
Great. Thanks, Hall. Thanks for having me.
Investor Connect helps investors interested in startup funding. In this podcast series, experienced investors share their experience and advice. You can learn more at investorconnect.org. Altira Martin is the director of Investor Connect, which is a 501c3 nonprofit dedicated to the education of investors for early-stage funding. All opinions expressed by Hall and podcast guests are solely their own opinions and do not reflect the opinion of Investor Connect. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon as a basis for investment decisions.